We're getting some
Right.
good mornings and hellos and greetings from the past in Mexico. So we are here in Australia, on the East Coast at least. It is 10 a.m. in the morning on Thursday the 6th. Is that where we are? I get lost. And that means for others, I know that Alyssa, who I work with, it's probably around 10 or 8 p.m. On her side of the world. And she's tuning in because she's keen to learn a bit more about podcasting herself, even though she's just a machine when it comes to online ministry. And we have a number of people here. So what I might do, guys, if Kyle, I would love for you, Kyle with a Y-L-E, because the pronunciation gets tricky. I'd love for you to start us off with some prayer, and then we'll introduce this. Just so you guys know, all of this is recorded, except we use after the prayer to actually introduce the video or the episode, and then that will be shared online as well on YouTube and other places as well. So Kyle, do you want to start us off with prayer?
Sure, love to. Father, I want to thank you for an opportunity to meet together here as a group of ragtag podcasters. Lord, I pray that the point of this video, this recording, would be the same as every podcast to ultimately bring people closer to you, and that might bring others closer to the kingdom as well. And so, Father, we invite you to be amongst us in this discussion. Pray that you inspire our hearts and our minds. And we pray that those who get to watch this episode would really find something in it that would inspire them. Amen.
Amen. Awesome. Well, I want to welcome you guys all to today/tonight/wherever you are episode of for Adventist Digital Missionaries. We're focusing on the idea of podcasting today, and I'm kind of really excited because I know that podcasting generally is something that people do in the depths of, a basement or in your bedroom or just somewhere where the introverts kind of generally flourish. And while I myself have been putting off one because of just life circumstance and general fear of performance in that space, we've got a number of people who are with us today. So I want to introduce them all to you, and I'm going to say your name, and I'd love for you to tell us the name of your podcast and where you're tuning in from. So we'll start with Catalina.
So I'm Catalina, and I am the one and only host of the Connected Adventist podcast. And I've been running my podcast for almost 2 years. So it'll be 2 years in November, which is a little exciting. I had no idea it would last this long, but I'm committed.
Cool. We have next, on at least on my screen, we have Kyle Morrison. Kyle, share us where you're tuning in from and the podcast that you run.
Oh, I'm in Queensland, Australia at the moment, and the podcast that I have something to do with is called Adventist on Fire. And
he has a shirt.
I have a shirt. Catalina has a shirt. You should go and put it on.
I got it. I'm not at my house.
Oh, okay. Bummer. I think it's been going for a couple of years. I really can't remember. I'm a bit of a sporadic podcaster when I get time amongst my other things. I do that stuff. And was that it? Was that all the questions?
That's all the questions for now, Kyle.
Okay.
Thank you. And then we've got two hosts. So Luke and Ben, there's a number of you guys, but how can we divvy this up between the two of you? Because we can't share both of your screens at the same time. Ben kind of looked to the left and Luke was there. Do you want to share with us?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, Ben or me?
Either or. You guys
Either
can
or. Okay,
rally it
well,
off.
I'll just, Ben, you can add anything that you like. The ministry started with 5 of us. One of us has since moved, but the 4 of us live here in Bundaberg, Queensland, Australia, and the podcast is Oztable Talk.
Cool.
Yeah, and just like Kat was saying, it's like amazing how time passes. We started this in mid 2016, so it's been a while.
It's been a great ride.
Awesome. And you were just saying that all of you are in Bundaberg. So did this start off? I mean, you mentioned a table. Does that mean that you actually gather together around a table? Is this possible during COVID or?
Ben, do you want to answer that?
Originally, yes, we'd be around a table, but at the moment we've had to go into the digital space. So we've all got webcams and worked out how to do all our individual recordings and combine them all together to make the podcast. It's been an interesting development for us.
Yeah, it makes for a little bit more production time, but ultimately we still get to do what we do, which is great. We do miss, definitely have missed doing the in-person stuff because you don't get to pick up on as much, nuance and body language and that. But it's good. I think we've been able to overcome the barriers. So.
Cool. And then we've got Jose. Do you want to share a bit about who you are, where you are, and your podcast as well?
I'll mute myself first. Yep.
Yeah.
Good idea.
So my name is Jose Briones. I am in the United States. I'm in the south of the United States, in the state of Georgia. And I host Disruptive Adventism. So that is one of the many Adventist podcasts. And I've been doing this now for 2 years now. Yeah, it's been 2 years actually to the date. Tomorrow actually is 2 years. We started August 6th, 2018. The podcast has gone through different iterations. I have a shirt here and we ship to Australia as well. So if you guys want I'm sorry, what do you say?
Free shipping.
Free shipping. Yes.
Yeah.
Free shipping. Just send me a message on Instagram. That's the only thing. And I don't even manage that because I technically don't use social media anymore. But anyways, the podcast just talks about different things, different themes in Adventism and outside of Adventism as well. We have had multiple guests from Dan Jackson, now retired president of the North American division, to just, your random person in the middle of the street that I interviewed about the topic of circumcision, actually. So we interview anybody that wants to be displayed to the world. And we try to find, interesting topics. We try to be as consistent as we can be. But as you may find out once you start your podcast, it can get a little hectic.
Absolutely. That would be one of my fears personally in getting started. So this, as much as this is a webinar for other people as well, I'm definitely kind of sitting here on the edge of my seat being like, do I, don't I? And then I just realized that if I scroll across on my screen, I can hide my own face and present Carl Lindsay's face, which is our final panelist for today. Carl, do you want to introduce yourself, where you are, and your podcast as well?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Carl. Let me say that again. Carl Lindsay. That's the American version of my name, if for all those not living in Australia. Yeah, I am in Australia at the moment, usually living in America. We'll be back there soon, hopefully. I just started a podcast, 5 episodes in next Monday. So it's called the Overflow Podcast. And yeah, I'm excited about the journey. It's going to be a lot of work, but I'm excited because excuse me. Yeah, it's just a joy to kind of get into this kind of space where we can share the things that we're learning as the two co-hosts that I have.
Cool. Well, I dragged Carl and he was like, oh, I'm just new to this. And I was just like, makes it even better because there's a lot of us that are really new to this. So you'll be able to empathize with us at least. I am noticing, first off, and this kind of came to mind, that a lot of you have chosen different types of titles for your podcast. And I thought, obviously, when you're getting started, if this is anything that or anybody's interested in, then choosing a good title is that the all-important thing? Have you changed them? Why did you choose the name that you chose? And anyone can shoot first.
Well, I was going to say, sorry. How's that? You go for it.
Sure, I'll take the one. Disruptive Adventism. Well, number one, at the beginning, I was just like, this is a cool name. I like it. I'll go with it, And as I started thinking about it a little bit more, I just came to the conclusion that, we need to have kind of like a shaking moment in Adventism. I don't want to get too theological here, but you know how Adventists are always talking about Revelation and Daniel, right? And they're talking about the end times, and we're usually talking about the shaking, like, that moment where everybody and only the faithful few are going to stay, right? So I kind of wanted to give it a spin on that idea, that the reality is that, many of us are very comfortable, especially in, what is called more developed countries or first world, countries, whatever you want to call them. So I wanted to make sure that there are topics addressed, things that, usually are not addressed in church. And honestly, a podcast is one of the best ways to have that discussion. So that's why I started, and that's why I kept the name, because it's disruptive. It's something that you're not going to hear every day. I think our latest episode was on abortion, and that's something that you don't just, get to talk with somebody on an everyday basis, but it should be, because, we should be able and willing to talk about different things and be respectful with other people.
And I think that's an increasing theme, especially in the podcasting world. Thank you for sharing that. I think, Luke, you were next in regards to your name.
Yeah, our name is probably one of the few things. I don't know that I'd call it a regret, but when we first started, we were thinking we were thinking quite small and simple, and we weren't trying to do anything really significant. And we basically picked that name because it was a domain that was available, and was like, yeah, well, that's fairly descriptive of what we do. And we just kind of, we talked about it for 15 minutes, and then we're like, yeah. And so we bought the domain, and that was that. And we've actually wrestled with, do we rebrand? Do we not? And at this point, like, we are open to rebranding, but we just haven't come up with a good enough name to warrant going through the pain of rebranding. So whether it stays this way forever, I'm not sure.
Yeah, cool. And I know that you often have to remind people that you are not to be confused with table talk by light bearers.
Yes, exactly. So that's one of the things, and so we even put that on some of our social media accounts, that that this is not us. We love them and we love what they do, but we are not them. So we're not like trying to like leverage their fame or anything like that. But the other thing that is really interesting is, like, in Australia, if you see AUS all put together, you will say that's Oz. That's shortened version for Australia. Whereas I talk to a lot of people that are outside Australia, and they look at it, especially like on Instagram handles or whatever, and they're like, "What's Ostable Talk? I'm not sure what Ostable is." It's not a natural thing for people that are outside of Australia, and so that's another thing. It's like, man. Well, they wish they could get that, but it's all right.
And yet, I think a focus on, like, in the same sense, Jose, that you were sharing, the focus on disruptive. In yours, this idea of coming around a table and having a discussion that's quite pertinent discussions, as I understand it, that we don't necessarily have enough in church community, that you're introducing to the table itself, for people to listen to in the safety of their car or wherever.
Absolutely. You could say that our mission, our 10-word mission, is that we have the conversations you wish you could have at church, because at church we have a tendency to stick with safe topics that are superficial, and not every church and not everyone's experience. But in order to avoid that, we attempt to model the discussions that people wish, or at least we wish, that we could have at church. And hopefully by doing that, that will encourage others to do the same thing in their circles of influence.
Cool. Kyle. Kyle. Kyle.
So I've actually prepared a little something here. So this is actually This is actually where I pulled my name from.
Wow.
This is meant to be Entrepreneur on Fire, but
he rebranded.
It looks like he's rebranded to Fire Nation. But this is John Lee Dumas from Entrepreneur on Fire, so EO Fire, and he actually does interviews with entrepreneurs who've done amazing things, and talks about how they set up their businesses, where they're most profitable, lots of different things that interest entrepreneurs. And I was listening to this podcast for years and thought, man, how can we get Adventists more fired up? And so that's where my name came from, Adventist on Fire, for my podcast. This guy's making $171,000 in June. His podcast is also about passive income streams and different things. I haven't figured out how to make $170,000 a year out of my podcast, but We'll get
I'm
there.
only making like 6 figures, bro, but you'll get there.
Okay.
and Kyle, when you figure that out, just give me a call. Hey, bro.
Sure. I'll let you
Yeah,
know.
please.
And don't forget to tithe as well.
You double tithe on that stuff.
Awesome.
Tithe and offering, yeah.
Yeah. Catalina, do you want to share about yours as well?
Yeah, so I am a very visual person, and it may sound weird, but God just gives me things. And when I felt impressed to start the podcast, all I could see was a PowerPoint. And I was
It's
like,
an outlet for the non-Australians, like a power outlet.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carl. Thanks. No, so it was like it was the plug, the cable plug that goes into the PowerPoint or power outlet. And in my head, I was like, I hope Pages has a symbol for that, because I don't have any graphic design software to be able to do that kind of thing. So the next morning I wake up, I'm like, let me see if I can find it. And there was a symbol for a plug, for the PowerPoint plug. And from there, God kept giving me different ideas and concepts, and we came up with the idea of connected. And the podcast basically emphasizes this idea of our connection with God and our connection with the church. Rather than looking at it on a corporate level, hey, what the conference needs to do, what the leadership needs to do, it really focuses on what's my connection with God and how can I impact my church with the connection that I have with God. So yeah, it's a more personal approach. And I guess if you're picking your podcast name as well, one thing that to take into consideration is that if you want it to be targeted for Adventists, then you can try and incorporate like Adventist lingo into your podcast name, or put Adventist or Adventism in it. Then it's just when people search it, you'll get a higher amount of Adventist that will, if they're searching for Adventist, your podcast or your stuff will come up. If you want it to be more like a broader Christian thing, then make it more like, just more specific to the people that you're trying to like reach out to. So yeah, that's how my podcast name came about.
That's awesome. And it's really interesting, Catalina, that your idea of connecting first with God and then being able to, I'm going to use Carl's word, overflow into others. Segue, Carl, do you want to share a bit about your new podcast that you've just started?
Yeah. So I think a lot of you see people around in life who are kind of struggling and not living the abundant life that Jesus talked about. John 10:10, that is kind of the base text that had been floating in my head for a long time, and just started coming and seeing a lot of, seeing a lot of this principle of overflow in the Bible. And this idea just came to me one evening. I kind of like Catalina was saying, I think God gave me that word and just built the podcast theme and all that around that, just looking into how we can have personal growth through spiritual and mental and emotional health. So that's kind of where it started, and it's going to be developing from there over the next few months.
Cool. And I think that's all of these have, I don't know if anyone else has noticed this, but all these are very relevant. I mean, a lot of you that I've chosen to be on here / help with the help of Catalina found to be on here, your focus is primarily, I guess, on Christians, and with those that do have that Adventist twist to it, obviously it's for Adventists. I myself, when I was becoming an Adventist again, if you can say that, I would search the word Adventist when I was trying to figure out what Adventists were putting out there in the world. And so even as a seeker, you've heard of this name, to see what content they're putting out there is really important. And one thing I want to share is that you guys are doing an incredible ministry, because the church corporately can only do so much. Kyle and I know a little bit of the behind the scenes side of that, of knowing that as a corporate face for the world, the church can't speak into the lives of everyone. And so in different ways, even Carl, your podcast recently has been really speaking into my life, and I've been able to share that with other people, because the theme of needing to be filled before we can overflow is so important, especially in the time of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And then Jose, your podcast, in terms of having these discussions that the world is having that maybe church isn't necessarily having, is super important at this time as well. Kyle, the way that you're showing how there are amazing people that have surrendered their lives to God and that are just, living that the three angels message, and showcasing that. And Jose, I know you do that as well with your podcast. These are really important things for us to be able to show how the little man can essentially make such a big impact and inspire us to do the same. And I really love, and I'm going to switch.
Before you do, Ruth,
Yeah.
I'd actually say more than that. It's actually every member's job to do that. It's not actually the corporate's responsibility to do the job of the members. And so as church members, God has actually empowered every one of us and every one of you listening to actually do what you can to increase the footprint of the gospel, God's church. And that should be what we all expect of each one of us. I think that's my belief. And so I'll throw that in.
Yeah, it makes sense. I know that I was just reading that, I think it's the memory verse for this week, and I haven't memorized it yet. But it talks about, I think it's 1 Corinthians 12:11. It talks about like the Holy Spirit gives everybody gifts, and he does so according to his will. And so it's this idea that we've all been blessed with these spiritual gifts that are actually meant to be poured out onto others, to use the terminology and concepts that Kyle has in his podcast. I love how this is all tying together. But that means that whether you are looking at starting a podcast or you're trying to understand how podcasts work and how to share them and how to create a community that listens to them together, maybe like a book club, for instance, which just came to mind just then, which is an excellent idea. You can essentially make an impact. So there's a whole lot of guys here that have obviously gone ahead and done something, but it just goes to show that when God puts something on your heart, you've kind of got to respond to that. And it's the key theme that's happening here, is that all of you have had that moment of going, I started this because I just felt that there was a need and the Holy Spirit was leading me in that way. The question I had, because with Oz Table Talk, for instance, you have not just a podcast, but you have an entire website that's built behind it. At what point did you, or this is a question for everyone, I guess, is the podcast and just the recorded episode enough, or do you think that there's more that is involved in ministering with your podcast? Like, are there extra resources and that type of thing you think you've had to develop?
I would answer that in two ways, or in two parts. One is just doing the episodes enough? In a sense, yes, because the fact that the fact that there's more that you can do shouldn't stop you from starting. So, if you're starting and that is where you're starting, just doing the audio and releasing it, great. And you can start there, and it will grow if you're producing good quality content. But what I would say is, I don't think that as you grow as a ministry, ultimately, it doesn't matter whether you're a YouTuber or a podcaster. Ultimately, we are in media ministry, and the internet is multifaceted, and multimedia is there for a reason. And so if you do one, it will eventually bleed into other areas. And that's what we're finding, and I would love to say, just do this and your ministry will grow. But there's all these different parts to it that all come together. So, you create the audio, but then you use the social media to tell people that it's actually there. And then, you add things to it. Like for us, we're not there yet, but we're moving towards releasing video as well, because once you release video, you then get access to an audience that you don't have, because the podcast base, listening base is a lot smaller. And so then that brings more people into the family, so to speak. And so it grows, but it doesn't have to be that big. You don't have to start there, is probably what I would say.
Yeah. Jose, it looked like you were about to say something.
It's different. At least for me, it's different. It really depends on what you're trying to do. So if you are going to be a full-blown digital missionary, just publishing the podcast will not cut it, right? You have to engage with people, make sure that you are that you are, posting on Instagram, making sure that you're answering questions, connecting on that. If that's your passion, go for it. Don't stop. Like publishing is great, it's kind of like a first step, but the interaction that you have with the people, making polls, making stuff like that, that's where you truly get to see, the impact that you make. The thing is that, well, at least for me, in this past 2 years, I made the big jump to delete all social media. So for me, it's like, even though I have a podcast and a YouTube channel, my focus is not on the digital world per se. Like I do have digital resources and I have these conversations and I'm making content, but I am not so much for interacting. And that's just a decision that I made for myself, just because I wanted to kind of like take back and see the approach I wanted to have with technology myself. So this is not related, had I stayed, had I decided to stay in social media and stuff like that, I would say that publishing is just not, I mean, it's enough, but you really need to go the extra step if you want to make it something serious. Just a recommendation, a lot of people get really scared when it comes to this, and we may talk about equipment in the future, but something that is even more helpful right now, that I would, right now that we're on the Zoom era, right? We're all using Zoom. So for example, this is getting recorded and published, right? This recording can be published both as a podcast, and it can be recorded and published as a video. So if I were to start again, like if 2020 was the year where I started my podcast, I would start live streaming on YouTube and then just grabbing that audio and put it on a podcast feed. So you're saving time. You don't have to make a super high quality interview. And as you go, you start figuring out things like, oh, maybe I can get a camera when I, record with people. Instead of starting only with audio and then moving into the video world. So like if I were to start today, I would say, in order to make it more engaging and stuff like that, Instagram, number one. Mm-hmm. Instagram is number one. Like in my personal opinion, Instagram is number one. Then you go YouTube, and then finally your feed, because that's Instagram and YouTube is where you're going to get that contact, that interaction, comments and stuff like that. And then on the podcast, it's just, the feed that you're publishing. So, yeah.
And if I can just throw something else in on that, when we started, one of the main reasons that we started with a podcast as opposed to any other kind of media was because of the lower production time, because when you're doing video, it's a lot harder. There's a lot more time consuming. And the other thing was a number of the guys in the team were pretty uncomfortable in front of a camera, whereas sticking a microphone in their face wasn't that scary. And so it was one of those things where it was like, okay, well, let's just take the path of least resistance to get into the industry. So
I can see Catalina kind of smiling and rocking back on a chair in agreement. This is like throwing me back like maybe 2 years ago, and I would not accept anyone's invitation to be on a video. And so as I guess a natural introvert, though outgoing, for me, I prefer to like not be visible at all. Jose's doing some product placement.
Yeah, this is just for later. I was actually going to say, we can do, I would love, so I love helping people. So, I mean, I'm not trying to showcase in anything, but if you guys want, I can send this as like, we can do a giveaway right now to like, some people. Yeah, I don't mind. I have two of these. So like, these are my personal recommendation for hobby. Like if you were to start today and you were like, I don't want to get this big clunk thing, I just want to plug in something, this will be the mic I would recommend. I'll put it in the text as well. But I have two, so we can do a giveaway right now for people. And I don't know, what do we ask them to do? Like comment why they want to start a podcast?
I know, like, we'll ask them to listen to the Connected Adventist podcast.
And give you a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, right?
How about what we do is, I don't know, unless Kyle has a better idea, because he seems to be the brains behind this thing. I'm more of the I don't know, chatty one. No, you chat as well. This is really weird. It's going south. We've got a number of attendees that have been on today, and I'd really like to honor them for joining us. So we should definitely choose between them, but I don't know. Can we throw their names into like a, can you figure that out for me?
Well, while you think of that, can I just add to the comment that both Luke and Jose have mentioned is, I think if you're willing to put yourself out in the podcasting space, I think God has already worked on your heart that you have a desire to reach people with whatever it is that he's calling you to, and the natural outcome or the blessing that God will give you through putting yourself in this space is that he's going to bring people into your life through the podcast. I know that I asked a few of our podcasting crew for some, they answered some questions for a presentation that I had to do on digital ministry. And one of the things that they all said was one of the biggest blessings of being in the digital space was the engagement that they have from listeners. Being able to communicate with them, having them message and say, hey, that particular episode you did, that was my experience. I'd never heard anyone speak about that. I did an episode on masturbation and pornography from a woman's perspective. And I had someone reach out to me and were like, you have no idea how much I've wrestled with why I have such a strong, like I'm just chained up to this behavior and all these things. And no one has ever talked about it with me. And she said, at the end of this, I just felt such a relief and comfort to know that God is working through this whole situation. So that's what's going to come out of it. And I think you just have to be prepared for that if you are going to put yourself out there, people are going to be drawn to specific episodes, and we need to nurture that. We need to nurture the vulnerability that they've reached out, that they've said, yes, I've been in that experience. Yes, I'm struggling to forgive someone. Yes, the church has hurt me, and be able to connect with them on a deeper level and be like, hey, tell me about your experience. How was it? Where are you now? How do you feel now with your connection with your church, with your God, with your walk? So it is a natural blessing, but like both the guys have said, like it is something that you have to be willing to invest time into once that does happen.
I've got a question that's related to this, and it's for you, Carl. I just won't ever be able to get over that. Your experience, because you've been on this journey, you've released 5 episodes, and this is pretty fresh. How long ago did you start, and how have you found the engagement or the connection that you've had with listeners so far?
Yeah, so the idea came in April, at the end of April, to put it all together. Honestly, I'd been thinking about a podcast in the back of my mind for maybe a couple of years, but it finally kind of clicked into the theme and everything. So that was end of April. Then May was building the website and developing the core ideas, what it was actually going to be all about. And then from there, we moved into developing, finding a co-host and developing those first few episodes and the direction, establishing that direction. So that was good. And then, July, we kind of launched that 3 weeks ago. So it's been a journey in that sense. Trying to build engagement, that's the challenge, obviously. I'm one of those introverts that's like, I don't really, it feels weird to kind of reach out, but I have, on Instagram, we started our own Instagram thing and connected with different people, chatted to Luke a little bit, and it's been I started asking some people who were willing to follow us, like, hey, so tell us what's the overflow, what's the thing you want to be more overflowing in your life? So just initiating engagement is one way to do it as well. Just saying, hey, this is what we're about, and how would it, where are you seeing a need in your life?
That's
what I say at the moment.
Yeah, that's all I'm going to say. I was one of those people that received that message, and it really got me as a recipient. I thought, oh, how awesome that from the get-go, this podcaster is seeking to understand its audience. And so sometimes you'll see that some podcasters, or even just some YouTubers or whatever it might be, I'll say this. Sometimes
just say it.
I'm gonna be fine. No, I find, and I've reiterated this a few times, that sometimes we get content, we see it, it's like, Three Angels Message 1844, like Revelation chapter 6, or I don't know, like something just, and it's just an image and people just mass share it. And I wish that as Adventists and as Christians and as followers of Jesus, that we would be more open to understanding the people that we seek to engage with. Like, why are we sharing this content? And podcasting, it seems like a space where you kind of have to be very much aware of that from the get-go, because people are listening to your voice week in or day in, day out, depending on how frequently you do this. But, you know, they're listening to podcasts. They're not just listening to it because of just general excitement, or, I mean, it could be that reason. But I, for instance, would listen to podcasts as I would drive to work and as I would come home. And it was a way for me to engage with deeper content after playing, you know, with kindergartners like all day and talking about their own like traumas and issues. So it was for me to re-engage in things. And so to like on a conversational level, we expose ourselves quite immediately when people can hear your tone of voice, when they can hear your emotion and that kind of thing. And so it sounds as though so far one thing that you're all learning is that being in touch with your listeners, with your engagers, is really important. Have you ever had, I know Catalina, you were sharing somebody had positive feedback. Have you ever had this negative feedback that really rocked you're sitting there and wondering, should I continue doing this? Or
Yes, I did. Let me tell you about my so I did a podcast episode, and it was regarding LGTB, the LGBTQ community. And I went into that episode. So I interviewed a gay Adventist couple, and I went into that interview thinking only non-affirming SDAs are going to listen to this, not realizing, hey, I'm actually putting affirming gay Adventists on this, and they're probably going to have some of their people listening to that podcast. And just the way I worded that interview in the beginning, it was full of triggers for that audience, where in my mind I was like, oh, I did the interview for people like me, people like I've heard within the church who just struggle to understand how Christians can be gay. And so I went into that way. And yeah, there was a lot of negative response to the way that I dealt with that interview. And I agree with them that I was definitely very insensitive, probably because I wasn't educated well enough to go into that interview. So yeah, that was a little negative.
How did you pull that around?
I actually did a video. I thought it was the best way to be transparent about that. There was a lot of comments on the post. So a gentleman who is gay affirming, he's gay himself, he shared the interview. And then, yeah, from there, obviously all the people from gay affirming communities got on there and they wrote their comments. And I just thought, instead of trying to reply to every single message and trying to be like communicating all that sort of stuff on there, I just thought, let me do a video and address all those comments and all those concerns. And yeah, so I just did that. I must say I've learned my lesson. I don't think I'll go into a topic like that without being really like educated on how to present it for both sides, where in my mind I just thought this is just going to my type of people. And yeah, so I learned that lesson real quick.
And that's a really important thing to point out, that when you are creating content for an audience, it doesn't mean that's the only audience that's going to come across.
Yes.
So I don't know, Luke, you seem to be nodding your head. Ben, I don't know if you guys know of a story or an experience where you've had to, maybe it might not be like as specific as negative feedback, but you were just really going, do we continue with this generally? Is this, even the question in general for everyone, is this sustainable personally and in terms of ministry as well?
And oof.
Yeah, Jose, you probably got
Like,
some
let me
story
tell
around
you
that.
about sustainability.
Yeah, I mean, no. Go ahead, Luke. I'll talk about sustainability later. I think
Yeah, well, it is. I actually feel like that's probably one of the really big deals with any kind of media production where you're on a release schedule. Sustainability has to be one of the really important things to talk about. I mean, we've had some flack, but typically I filter that flack by asking, is this person in our target market? Are they the people that we're trying to serve? And if they're not, then I'm quite comfortable throwing out their advice. Because they're not the people that I'm trying to help anyway. So, we've had our fair share of that. I think anybody that puts things out there gets that. But as far as like the question of, do we even do this anymore? We had a situation, Kyle, you're hilarious. If we had a situation, a couple of, probably last year sometime, where, I don't know, like all of our audience just seemed to flatten off, and we weren't getting any engagement from people. No one was responding. And after you do, and numbers were trending downward. And when that happens long enough, you start to ask yourself, are we still serving the same people that we served before? What went wrong? What happened? And at that time, strangely enough, we were releasing probably some of the better quality stuff that I think we've released. And just a lot of praying, and I don't really even know what happened, but we just kind of held on that little bit longer. And like, even in our group, there were a number of us that were starting to ask that question of, what does a graceful exit look like? If we were to finish now and say, hey, this was a great experiment, what does that look like? And I don't know. I don't know what happened in Ben. You might be able to speak to what was happening in your mind, but for me, it was a case of, well, I don't feel like God's will has changed. I feel still called to do this. And so I think it's time to just, buckle up and try, keep going for now anyway, and reevaluate later. And our numbers all turned around. I started getting, messages from people. I got one, like, for me in Australia, right? Like 2 a.m. in the morning, I got the message from a young guy in his early 20s, like at a crossroads in life. And he was like a spiritual leader in his church, youth leader, and all the rest of it. And he was in a position where he felt like he had nobody in his world that he could speak to, because he was the one that was supposed to have the answers. And he listens to our podcast. And so he was like, hey, can I talk to you for a minute? And I just happened to be awake. I've got kids. I had to be awake right then. And I was like, yeah, sure. And so I sat down and we chat on Instagram for like 3 hours. And I was like, yeah, okay, Lord, I get it. This is why I'm here, right? And we continued on. We're still going, like, we're a year past that now.
Yeah, I think it was
Ben,
Ben.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, it was. I remember about that time we were raising the question: do we continue or not? And it was. I think that little bit of audience interaction that really turned it around for us and kept us going. Just knowing, even with the trending numbers down, we knew that we were still making an impact on some people's lives, and it was a case of, well, if we're making an impact on some people's lives, then it's still worth doing. It doesn't matter whether we're tracking downwards, we're still helping people, and that kept us going. And we're tracking back up this year again, which is good. It's always good to know that we're helping more and more people.
And I think it's really interesting, the uniqueness. Carl, your podcast has a co-host, for instance, with his own life and his own responsibilities and priorities and that type of thing. But even with Oz Table Talk, you initially said there was 5 of you, and now there's 4. But fitting in everyone's lives and personal lives, and that must be quite tricky as well to sustain a podcast.
That's very interesting. It is a blessing and a curse all at once, because fitting in everyone's lives is a challenge. Like, as an example, Matt, Wilsey, he's when he became a dad, as an example, he was sort of out of circulation for a while, so he wasn't recording in the shows. The great thing about that is, because the rest of us are still there, we could keep recording, so the show didn't have to stop. And in the earlier times, I was doing a lot more of the editing and the production, the behind the scenes stuff, and Ben has taken like a huge chunk of that work off me now. And so, I'm in a place in my life where I don't have as much time as I wish I did, for a bunch of reasons. But, the podcast would have probably suffered if Ben wasn't able to take that load off me, as an example. So having multiple people is hard, because you have to coordinate a lot more, but it's also better because you can share the workload. That's just a good thing to think of as well when you're starting a podcast, when you're deciding, is this going to be a solo show? Am I going to have a co-host, or am I going to have a team? Like, what is it going to look like? You have to think about the dynamics and what that looks like in your world as well.
Jose, are you a solo host on Disruptive?
Ooh, that's a good question. Yes, at the moment, yes. It wasn't always like that. We had a team at one point in time. We don't have a team anymore. It's only myself. Um, something that I want to share on that point is like, you will go, it will fluctuate, like you'll go up and down and up and down. Like, when I really first started on Disruptive Adventism, I was publishing twice a week. So twice a week.
You're
That's a
brave,
lot.
man.
I remember those days. It was like twice a week, and it was difficult. I mean, but I did it, and then I went down to once a week, and now it's like I'm only looking at the average, actually. So we hit 2 years, right? So 2 years, that's 104 weeks. So I'm looking to keep an average of one a week. I have 125 episodes, so I'm 21 weeks ahead right now. And here's the thing, life will hit you. Like, I just got married, right? Like, 3 weeks ago. And
Congratulations.
Having had time. Then I decided to start a YouTube channel out of all things, because, let's just acknowledge that sometimes your passions shift, so now I'm looking to start like just the average, keep that one a week. And eventually I'll just, kind of like whenever I release, like in my hard drive right now, I have about 30 episodes that I need to, like, I could release them. This is the other thing actually that I wanted to say. Figure it out what kind of a podcast you want to have, because a conversational podcast will be easier for you to edit and publish, faster and just get it out there, right? I started like that. And that's why I was just able to like, okay, here's the conversation. I edit quickly and boom, we go. But then I switch into a little bit more of like production podcasts where you do narration, where you kind of voice over certain parts and kind of like, and that will be better. It'll be like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. Like people will be like, oh, this is great, good quality. But it will take way longer. If I wanted to, I could, I don't know, spend the next week and a half doing all these interviews, making sure that they sound good. And then I have 30 episodes that I just release. But I don't want to do that. I want to tell a story with the content that I have, with the responses that I gathered. But that's my personal style. Like once I started doing it that way, it was way more fun for me because I had to be creative in the process. And it was just not like republishing a conversation. There's nothing wrong with republishing a conversation, by the way. If that's your motivation, you just want to make sure that people listen to an expert or something like that. It's the same thing on other platforms like YouTube. There's a channel for everything. And there are channels who are very well produced. And there are channels, if you have ever watched Joe Rogan, he's like the biggest podcaster. He just publishes a conversation and that's it. And he's like literally the biggest podcaster. He got paid like, I don't know how much is undisclosed from Spotify to move his podcast into the platform. People say it's like $1 billion. But it just depends on what your purpose is. If you just want to publish conversations, go ahead. If you want to do something more creative, if you want to do narration, if you want to do like reenactments of books, like from The Great Controversy, or like you want to do a reenactment of Adventist history, there's a lot of documents out there for you to do that. So yeah, sustainability. Don't beat yourself if you miss a week. People have lives as well. They're not waiting for you to drop the podcast, like, anxiously, like they get to it. And if I can say something is, look into other platforms that you don't usually would think. So my biggest market right now, and this is probably, I haven't shared it with anybody because I haven't been on social media, but my biggest market right now is on what we call dumb phones or feature phones, right? Like, the little flip phones. So that's my biggest market right now. And you would not think that, because you will think like podcasts, high tech, you need an app for that. Well, they make apps for flip phones to actually get podcasts, and that's my biggest market. Literally 40% of my market is on flip phones. And I would have never thought that. I found that out maybe about 2 months ago.
How did you find that out?
Yeah. So,
Yeah. Okay, now I'm listening.
So,
before, but now he is.
so usually my listens, I'll give you kind of an idea. When you first start, don't focus on the listens. I mean, like, it's important to know that you're reaching some people, and like, start slow and then it'll pick up, and then you'll kind of plateau, right? When I first started, I was picking up like maybe 50, maybe 60 listens a week. Then I went up to like probably like 400, 500. Some podcasts, I even had thousands of listens because of the people that I interviewed. And it was like crazy, right? Like, I was like, oh my goodness, this is such a great experience. And then you plateau, and then you're like, I guess I'm not that great. But, don't let that discourage you. So a couple of weeks ago, I was looking at my statistics, and I started looking, and I was like, okay, I have this platform, Apple. I have some Android apps here and there. And then on my YouTube channel, I've been testing this little phone. Give me a second.
Yeah.
This one right here. So for my YouTube channel, I tested this device. It's a Nokia device. For those of you who are, old school, but it's kind of like a newer one, right? And they make different apps for this. This has WhatsApp. This has podcast. This has, many multiple things. So I contacted the person who makes the app for the podcast app for this phone. And I asked them like, hey, can you put my podcast on your platform, right? Because it's another app. And they said, yes. And I can actually feature your podcast in the top of the list for my app. And I was like, how much would that cost? And he said, $2 a day. And I was like, $2 a day? I'm in. I tried it out for a month, and my listenership went from usually, the 300s or the, 350 to almost 700, 1,000, because I'm getting people from all over the world looking at this app, right? Which is very small. You can do this on other platforms like Pocket Cast, Overcast. There's plenty of other apps, but the prices are, of course, way more. So that's the little secret that I've been holding, I guess, since until today.
It's out. It's out now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I can give you.
You realize that now, like, everyone's going to rush off and do it, and you're going to be charged like $5 a day now.
Hey, I mean, if I'm probably going to message him right now and just be like, hey, I mentioned your podcast app. We have a deal. I got a deal,
Yeah.
Before we move on, can I just add to sustainability real quick, Ruth?
Yeah.
So just keep in mind, so at one point, one of my close friend, Charlie, we were going to co-host, and she was like, yes, she was so pumped. So we did like this whole thing. She's going to be my co-host. She started going to uni. Her schedule changed. She lived in Bundy. I lived in Gin Gin. So just keep in consideration, like really pray about who to be a co-host or who's going to be in your crew. And just be realistic. Like, we can have like a real passion to be part of something, but like Jose said, life goes on, schedules change, priorities change. And then how are you going to shift that within your podcast community? How are you going to work through that? For me personally, I'm so glad it's just me, because I know my drive. I know how determined I am, and I know that I am happy to record. I record most of my podcast the morning of publishing. So I get up extra early. I have my prayer and devotional time, and I do my podcast 4 o'clock in the morning, and I publish that morning at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, Monday morning.
That's living life on the edge, Kat.
I know, that's how I live life. My editing is minimal for that same reason, because I know my schedule. I know what I'm realistically able to invest in that. So like Jose said, mine is conversation. The editing I do is I put some music at the beginning and a music at the end, and that's all you get. My editing takes about 3 minutes. It takes longer for it to like process than it does to edit. When I do interviews, it's double the interview time. If the interview is an hour interview, I'm editing for 2 hours and I'm not really doing much. So just take that into consideration. You keep that in mind, the workload that interviews are going to have on you. Also, if it is going to be focused with, my podcast is going to be an interviewing podcast where you're always going to have guests. Realistically, like how many guests can you get? Then you have to work with their schedule, which then has to work with your schedule. So keep all that stuff in mind. Yeah, because at some point you're going to get to a point where it'll be like, oh, our schedules don't work, and you're going to be having to do it last minute. And then are you going to be able to edit, considering your editing is quite involved and takes a lot of time? So yeah, keep that in mind and be realistic as to, hey, this is what I can provide. And just remember, God's going to bless it. Whether you have, like I tell people, I recorded on my iPhone for 6 months. And I just had an upside down phone in a mug. That's all I did for 6 months. And God blesses our efforts. And whether we are really skilled and we have a lot of time and we have a lot of equipment and gear, he's going to bless that. If you're producing an epic podcast where it feels like you're in a movie, awesome. God will bless that just as much as an upside down iPhone. So just keep it in mind that if God has called you to this, he'll bless it, whether you do a great job or a not so great job, and whatever classifies great and not great. But yeah, just keep that in mind.
There was a point, that was a question actually that Alyssa asked. She said, how long should these episodes be? I can imagine thinking about who your audience is, when you kind of assume they would probably be listening, can sometimes dictate how long these episodes are. For instance, if the average drive to work is 30 minutes or something for people that live in a city space, you know, creating something that really cuts, you know, averages out around that time. If it's more of a conversation, does it go for longer? If it's more instructional, does it go for longer? What was a deciding factor for you guys in terms of how long your episodes go for, or do they alter in length depending on how you feel on the day?
I've tried to keep them under 40 minutes, aiming for 30, but sometimes it goes longer. That said, and because I was thinking on the commute idea, listening while driving to work, because that's when I do most of my listening. However, I did read somewhere recently that a whole bunch of people just listen at home. And so it doesn't necessarily mean that an extra 5-10 minutes isn't going to change their habits. I'll say, oh, I'm not going to choose that because I've only got a 15-minute drive. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I'm a big believer personally. I'm a big believer in the fact that like I mentioned in the chat, that they should be as long as it takes, but no longer. And what I mean by that is, you know, no waffle, nothing extraneous. Like if it's boring to listen to, it doesn't matter if it's 5 minutes or 4 hours. People are going to tune out if it's not interesting. And so go as long as it takes to tell your story or whatever, or have the conversation or whatever it is, but make sure it's tight all the way through. And I mean, a great example of that is there's a bunch of podcasts out there that release daily and are like 5-minute bites. They work. People download them. They get a lot of downloads. There's also people out there like Dan Carlin releasing Hardcore History, who regularly puts out 5-hour episodes, and he has one of like the biggest followings anywhere. And I quite happily listen to his podcasts in, you know, like 10-minute chunks when I wash the dishes, and then when I go for a drive, and then when I come back. You know, I don't need to listen to it all in one bite. And if I do, you know, like, I mean, when I do break it up, even if I come back to it the next day, the minute that he starts talking, I know exactly where he is, and I'm with him for the rest of the story because his content is solid. And I think, personally, I don't think it matters what length they are as long as they're good.
For my podcast, this is when I started, they were like 15 minutes. And I remember I would talk and talk and talk, and I'd be like, that was an awesome episode. Like, that is going to be, and I'd look and it was like 12 minutes and 30 seconds. I'd be like, it felt like I talked for like 40 minutes. So it does your confidence with the platform, you sort of get more comfortable, and then before you know it, I was doing like 1-hour episodes of me just going on and on and on about a particular subject that I just was impressed about to speak about. And then I decided, you know what, let me just ask my people let me ask the community, hey, what do you prefer? Do you prefer an hour or half an hour? Because I'm happy to do whatever you want. I can literally cut my conversation at 30 minutes. And they decided that they preferred half an hour for the same reason, for the commute reasons. And just my audience must be the type of people who, when they listen to podcasts, they listen on the drive. So I then decided to switch maybe like 6 months ago. I've gone down to try and work for half-hour episodes.
That's awesome.
Hey, so how did you go about asking your audience?
I just did a poll on Instagram. I think I got like 9 people who actually, and so the episode when I
statistically significant number, right?
Hey, that's all that matters.
When I announced it that next week, so I did a podcast and I'm like, hey everyone, I'm just letting you know that because none of you's engaged on my poll, 9 people have decided that we are now going to cut this to half an hour. So I put it out there to get feedback, and that's the feedback that I got. So that's what happened. So yeah, I just created a poll.
Can I share? So I shared an article on the chat, but for those who are watching this on YouTube, I'm just going to put it here on the screen. So this is Megaphone. Megaphone is one of the biggest, what's it called? Podcast hosts. They host like all of the big podcasts. And they host mine too, but that's a different story. That's because we have a network, but not because I could get in just by myself. But as you see here, this is the episode duration, and most of them is like from 60 and on. As you see, it starts flattening out, like it's just going down. But right here, this is the highest point. 900 episodes out of the survey podcast, which was like 500 podcasts, they last an hour or like a little bit less than an hour. But right here, as you see, the less than 20 minutes, they're going pretty strong. Like right here, like these are getting shorter. So check out this article. It's called Podcasts Are Getting Shorter. And the reason why is because news or things like that. Also, another secret to share about the industry is that kids podcasts are huge. Oh my goodness. I could not believe when I was reading articles about kids podcasts. They are big, like big time, as my president here in the United States says, bigly. They are pretty big, Ruth is like, no, no, it's crazy. It's huge. Yes. Okay. Stop with the jokes now. No, it's pretty big. And I could not believe it. I have a friend who just started a podcast for his church. He's a youth pastor and he started a podcast for his youth. He gets like more listens that I have ever gotten, like in my first couple of episodes, because, parents put it for their kids and it's short, it's sweet, and they get to connect with their pastor. Right. So yes, kids podcast is one of those things that is quite important. So,
sorry, just so people know as well, in the next couple of weeks, I'm actually looking at online, running a webinar for online ministries for children. So this might actually be a point. I might get in contact with you to connect with that person, for instance. I'm thinking about probably wrapping up in the next couple of minutes, but Kyle, I just want to draw attention firstly. I wonder if you got that randomizer up for us with the names, but also I just want you to kind of move your head again over to those earpods, because we all as panelists could see it, but you need to say something so that people can see you on the screen. He's not saying anything.
I think that's close. It's hard to get the mirror image thing going. But
so earlier, while Luke was kind of sharing his heart, Jose and Kyle were changing their backgrounds to feature like promoting that kind of thing, and we were all trying not to laugh. So
yeah, it's all right. I'm used to those guys.
Sorry, Luke. Sorry, buddy.
Cool. And Kyle, do you want to wrap things up for us with a bit of a giveaway?
Sure.
We've got
so yeah, Jose has kindly offered some more than merch. It's some equipment. And Jose, you put that up and I'll put up the shipping to wherever in the world it has to go, okay?
Sounds good. Let me take this off. One more area that I'd like to kind of touch before we kind of head out. This is the, by the way, this is the ATR, so Audio-Technica ATR 2100. ATR 2100 is a USB microphone, but it's not a condenser microphone. If somebody needs to kind of get into the whole tech and what microphone to get and stuff like that, please email me, disruptiveadventism@gmail.com. It's going to be in the chat as well. So, if you want to get anything or any ideas or whatever, just contact me. But one thing that I wanted to mention is that, for some people, if you get popular enough, this can become your career, and that it's, of course, it's going to take a little while, but it's not impossible. I myself have sold advertisements. Another secret for the industry right here. I'll put it on my screen. Here, this is, it's called Popcorn. So for small podcasts like yours and mine, right? We have Popcorn, which they put you in contact with different companies that you probably have never heard of, but that's okay, because probably not a lot of people have heard about your podcast either way, but as long as you have an audience and you have enough, whatever, you can select, for example, real paper, bamboo toilet paper. Never heard of that, but you can set up a proposal. You can send it, set up how much money. Let's say you want to charge $10 for one ad here on the August 10th. You go next, you write the proposal. Hey, this is me. This is what I need. And it's pretty easy to sign up, and you get the sponsorships. Just disclosing, I don't mind disclosing this. But these are some of the stuff that I have gotten over time. Maybe I can show you guys. So I've gotten approved for different ones. Oh, these are all my episodes. Here, dashboard. So this month I've made $15. It's not a lot, but hey, something is something, right? Last month I didn't make anything. The month before, 30, 20, 20, 50 on February, 90 on January. Of course, the more episodes you put out, I think the reason why I didn't make anything in July is because I didn't put out an episode. Yes, I didn't put out any episodes in July. But an episode is coming on the 17th, and I already have a sponsor there, which is Popcorn themselves. They also do sponsorships, but it's kind of like, something to reach out. I've had other sponsors in my podcast. You reach out to companies in your area. And of course, it depends on what your podcast is about. If your podcast is about your community or stuff like that, you can monetize that. If your podcast is about the Adventist church, you can talk to the general conference and see hey, I have a big audience. Would you like to, advertise the GC, the GC 2021, whatever it is, So, there you go. So I just wanted to say that.
And also, if I can make a really fast recommendation, I happen to grab a book on podcasting, and I've looked at several of them, and there is one that stands out way and above as by far the best resource that anyone can look at on the topic. It's written by a guy called Eric Newsom, and the book is called Make Noise. It is a brilliant, brilliant book. And I mean, Eric himself, he came from radio background, and he got into podcasting literally just after it was invented. So he's been in it for a very, very long time, and I found it very principle-based, so it's very applicable to whatever you're doing. I really recommend, if you're interested in podcasting, check out that book.
You want to type that into the comments there for us as well, Luke?
Yeah,
Kyle,
sure.
over to you.
All right, so let's let me get a screenshot of the people that are here still. What we'll do is we'll got a screenshot now of the people that are there in order. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's about 16 people.
Did you not screenshot it earlier? Because there was a few more, but oh dear.
Yeah, but they're not here now, so they miss out.
Can I just quickly add before we finish? Just also reach out to someone who has a podcast. I mean, my podcast literally started because of Luke. So Luke helped me out. Just reach out for someone who already has a podcast. I'm sure most of us are more than willing to help you as well. So reach out to us and we'll give you the bit of advice that we can give you, a bit of direction. But yeah, don't go it alone. It can get overwhelming setting it all up, and just reach out to people who have a podcast. Reach out to us if you'd like, or at least I'll volunteer. You can reach out to me, and that it'll make the process less overwhelming too. Okay, I'm done. Back to you, Carl.
All right, so we've got 15 people here. We will
16
chat
now.
to somebody. We'll chat to one of these 15 people, and we'll see what their podcast is going to be on when they get a free microphone. So we'll generate a number here.
Hang on.
Number 3.
Can you do it? Oh,
Too late.
there's 16
Number
on
3
there.
is Annette. Annette can have a mic if she wants one. Here we go. Let's stop sharing. Let's talk to Annette. Allow to talk. Hey, Annette, how you doing?
She's on mute.
Thanks.
Her microphone isn't
Annette.
working.
You are the winner.
Unmute. Come on, Annette, say hello and talk to us about what your podcast is going to be about.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Yeah.
Oh, great. I can't show you my face because it's early here in Australia and I'm still with my
What time are you? It's 11 a.m. here.
Sorry?
It's 11 a.m. on our side of Australia. You must be on the other side.
I am. I'm in Western Australia, so yeah, because I've been listening for a while. So yeah, I don't know what my podcast is going to be about yet, but I'm very interested and still working and praying. So
Cool. Great. Well, you've got some equipment coming to you, so you can get started.
If you needed a sign, this is your sign, Annette.
Well, that could be true too, because I was just, saying, Lord, I need your help to know what to do it about and things. So yeah, do I go ahead? So yeah, that's fine, isn't it? Thank you so much. Much appreciated.
Can I jump in there? Just some encouragement. I think for me, the content mostly came from my devotional time and just figuring out, like, learning that God is giving us things to say. He's giving things to me, and so I'm like, okay, well, it's my job to kind of share this to people who want to, or who are out there and may not be seeing things. We've all got different perspectives. We've all got different ideas and viewpoints and stories to share, and so that's probably a good place to start. If you spend time with God regularly, then you can kind of get those little nuggets that he's saying, and maybe it's just a 10-15 minute thing, but sharing that is a really good place to start.
Yeah.
Hear me still. I'm one of those people that God does wake up early, and I usually spend an hour in Bible study and an hour in prayer in the night, and then I go back to bed. I lead a Bible study group, and we're just reading through, like we've done Matthew, we're doing John now, and I was thinking of something where with a couple of people, we just talk through a Bible reading. So that's sort of the direction I was thinking of.
Awesome.
That would do it. That would do it.
Awesome. Have we got one more to give away, Kyle?
Yes, we do.
Yes,
we do.
Oh,
Yes.
sorry. Quick, one more. And then let's get skedaddling into the rest of our days.
Cool. I must have missed the memo there. I didn't know we were going with 2. So I've got that up still. Let me share screen. Random number generator. And we'll generate again. Number 6. Ooh, staying in the low numbers. Sorry, people. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Charles. Let's get Charles on the line. Stop sharing. Charles, allowed to talk. Unmute. Are you there, Charles? Do you have a podcast you would like to start?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I've been quite interested in children matters. I have 3 kids, and since we entered the lockdown, I've been very concerned about children education. So initially, I tried to get into YouTube, so I started a YouTube channel on that. But recently, I've been also very interested in getting into podcasting so that I can talk about my experience, doing homeschooling with the kids during this period, and what I think parents can do going forward. So that has been my passion in recent times.
Awesome.
Awesome. Yeah.
Great, Charles.
Great idea.
Awesome. Well, just make sure that I get the addresses.
Yeah. Yeah, if Charles and Annette, if you want to get in touch with me directly, then I'll help sort you out. So if you could just send me an email, kylemorrison@outlook.com, and I will make
Type
sure
it in the
that
chat.
you get.
Okay. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, guys. If you want to finish that up, Ruth.
Yep, awesome. I've been just so blown away and kind of blessed personally with how you have all shared, and in ways that are, you know, quite authentic and moments of vulnerability there as well. We obviously, each of you aren't, you know, the face of the official church, and so the content that you share is very much on a personal level as you're journeying through your own journey with God. And I just want to affirm you for even taking the time today to do that in regards to your podcasting. I do want to leave people with this thought of a theme that's been going on in these webinars is, yes, absolutely, we want to talk about the how and the technicalities of digital ministry, but also to remember that the most important thing is to really know for sure why we're doing what we're doing. And I know that I've been really blessed by Carl, Jose, Luke, Ben, Catalina, and Kyle to hear your stories of the whys behind what you were doing. Each of you have a different niche and it's connecting with a different audience. So thank you so much for joining us. For those of you that have tuned in or those of you that are watching back, I aim to have the links that were shared in the chat today that may have not gone up on the screen available in the YouTube comments, and perhaps in the next Monday Mission email as well. So they'll be there for you. But yeah, I encourage you guys, if you're looking at starting a podcast or you're wondering how to use podcasts that are already established as a ministry, then continue to get in touch with us. We have the Adventist Digital Missionaries Facebook group, which you can request to join. And that's where we post just, you know, communication of different ministries going on, you know, post questions on how-tos. And specifically, we really just want to build an army for God of people that are using whatever they can, whenever they can, to connect online. So thank you again to our panel.
Thank you,
Ruth.
Yeah. Thank you for tuning in, Jose, as well. You've got a whole lot of Aussies and you. But a special shout out to you because you have provided us with so much wisdom. The way that you've engaged with our attendees today has been really valuable, and you've positioned yourself to be, as has everybody, to be open to people getting in contact. So thank you so much, and for your giveaways as well.
Hey, whatever I can do. And again, if anyone has a question about podcasting or anything else, just disruptiveadventism@gmail.com. And I'll be there to help or send you away links, ideas, whatever.
And congratulations once again on your marriage and
thanks.
the commencement of your YouTube channel, or the direction you're going there as well. And yeah, thanks everybody who wore their t-shirts as well. That was really exciting. I don't know if it was intentional, but possibly. All right, so thank you.
Friend. Kyle that he is.
I'll have to start a podcast just so I can have a t-shirt myself.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Thank you. And for those of you that are tuning next week, we will have something at a similar time. I'm looking at blogging next week. So rather than vlogging or podcasting, we're looking at blog ministries. So more information will be out in the new week about that. See you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
For what you do.